It all started on a Friday evening. I remember it so vividly because I had just gotten home from work and was trying to shake off the exhaustion of the week. The house was quiet, too quiet, and I found myself staring at the clock, wondering why Sheila wasn't home yet. Usually, she'd text me some excuse if she was running late. But tonight there was nothing, just silence. I had been feeling uneasy for months. There were little things, you know? A new perfume I didn't recognize. Random nights out with her friends. Her phone, once left lying around, now glued to her like it contained state secrets. I'd convinced myself I was being paranoid, that it was just a phase, that maybe I was overthinking because work had me so stressed. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. That night, something inside me snapped. Instead of drowning my suspicions in Netflix or scrolling aimlessly through my phone, I decided to dig a little deeper. Sheila had always been meticulous about keeping her space clean and organized, but I noticed she'd been spending a lot of time in our guest room lately. She said she used it for work calls because the signal was better there. But tonight, I decided to check. I walked into the room, and for the first time in years, I felt like an intruder in my own home. Everything was in its place, too perfect, almost like it had been staged. I opened drawers, flipped through books, and even checked the trash can. Nothing. But when I looked at the bookshelf, I noticed something odd. A small jewelry box shoved behind a stack of novels. It wasn't hers. I knew it wasn't hers. Sheila wasn't the type to keep little knickknacks like that lying around. My heart raced as I opened the box, half expecting to find something meaningless. Instead, I found a pair of earrings, diamond studs. The problem was, I hadn't given them to her. I sat there, staring at them, trying to process what this meant. My mind raced with possibilities, but the simplest explanation was the most devastating one. She wasn't wearing these for me. An hour later, the front door creaked open. I heard her voice, cheerful, almost humming, followed by the soft rustling of plastic. "Hey, babe," she called out. "I brought flowers." Flowers? Sheila didn't bring flowers. That was my thing. Every month, I'd buy her a bouquet, just because. And now here she was, walking in like she had nothing to hide, holding a bouquet of bright red roses. My stomach churned. I stayed seated in the living room, my back to the door. She walked in, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. "You okay?" she asked, her tone casual but slightly off, like she was testing the waters. "Yeah," I said, my voice flat. "I'm fine." She moved past me, placing the flowers in a vase she pulled from the cabinet. "It's been a crazy day," she said. "I thought I'd bring a little color into the house. How was your day?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. My eyes were glued to her movements, searching for something, anything, that would confirm my suspicions. She was too calm, too collected. But then, as she turned to head upstairs, it happened. She froze. Her eyes locked on the empty spot on the wall where our wedding photo used to hang. I had taken it down earlier, just to see if she'd notice. Her face turned pale, almost ghostly, as if all the blood had drained from it in an instant. "Where's the picture?" she asked, her voice trembling ever so slightly. I stood up slowly, taking my time, letting the silence stretch between us. "I took it down," I said, keeping my tone as neutral as possible. "Why?" she asked, clutching the bouquet tighter, her knuckles turning white. I shrugged. Just felt like a change. Thought it didn't fit the vibe anymore. Sheila's lips parted as if she wanted to say something, but no words came out. She stood there, rooted to the spot, her eyes darting between me and the empty wall. For the first time in months, I felt like I had the upper hand. "I'm heading to bed," I said, brushing past her. "Long day. We'll talk tomorrow." I left her standing there, clutching those damn flowers, her face pale and her mind racing. As I climbed the stairs, I knew I had planted the seed of doubt. Whatever she was hiding, it wouldn't stay hidden for long. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the look on Sheila's face when she noticed the missing photo. She wasn't just surprised. She was terrified. That picture had been on the wall for years, a centerpiece of our home. For her to react like that, it meant something. She came to bed late, much later than usual. I pretended to be asleep when she slipped under the covers, careful not to wake me. I could feel her tossing and turning, her breath uneven, like she was trying to hold herself together. It was the first time in a long time that I felt like I wasn't the only one losing sleep. The next morning, I decided to play it cool. Acting suspicious or confrontational wouldn't get me anywhere, at least not yet. So, I stuck to my routine: coffee, a quick workout, and a quiet breakfast. Sheila, on the other hand, was unusually chatty. "Did you sleep okay?" she asked, pouring herself a cup of coffee. Her voice was a little too cheerful, like she was overcompensating. "Fine," I lied, keeping my eyes on the newspaper. "Good," she said, sitting across from me. "Hey, about that picture. Why did you really take it down? It's not like you to mess with the decor." I looked up from the paper, meeting her gaze. "I told you. Just felt like it didn't fit anymore." She laughed nervously. "Didn't fit? That picture was our wedding photo. Kind of important, don't you think?" "Was it?" I asked, my tone sharp enough to cut through her forced smile. Her face fell, and for a moment, I thought she might actually confess. But instead, she just shook her head and muttered something about me being moody. She grabbed her phone and disappeared into the guest room, the same room where I'd found those earrings. I waited a few minutes before following her. Quietly, I crept down the hallway and stood outside the door. I could hear her talking, her voice low and urgent. "No, he doesn't know anything," she said. There was a pause, followed by a strained laugh. "Yes, I'm sure. It's just a picture. Stop worrying." I felt my stomach twist. She was lying, not just to me, but to whoever was on the other end of that call. And the way she said, "He doesn't know anything," it was like a knife to the gut. I backed away before she could catch me eavesdropping and went back to the kitchen, my mind racing. I needed proof, real proof. The earrings were damning, sure, but I needed more. Something undeniable. That's when I decided to check her phone. It was risky, but I had to know. Later that night, when Sheila was in the shower, I slipped into the guest room and found her phone charging on the nightstand. My hands were shaking as I picked it up, praying she hadn't changed her passcode. She hadn't. I opened her messages, scrolling past the usual threads with friends and coworkers. And then I found it, a conversation with someone saved as work. The messages were mundane at first, just scheduling meetings and sharing reports. But as I scrolled further back, my heart sank. "I can't stop thinking about last night," one message read. Another, "You looked so beautiful in that red dress. I wish I could have kept you all to myself." And then the one that shattered me, "Don't forget to wear the earrings. They're my little secret." I dropped the phone like it was burning my hand. My mind was spinning, my chest tightening as if the air had been sucked out of the room. It was real. My worst fears were real. The shower turned off, and I knew I didn't have much time. I placed the phone back exactly where I found it and rushed to the living room, trying to steady my breathing. When Sheila came out, wrapped in a towel, she barely glanced at me before heading upstairs. I spent the rest of the night replaying those messages in my head, trying to figure out my next move. Part of me wanted to confront her right then and there, to demand answers. But another part of me knew it wouldn't be that simple. Sheila was smart, and she'd find a way to twist things, to make me doubt what I'd seen. No, I needed to be careful. If I was going to confront her, I needed to make sure there was no way she could talk her way out of it. The following day was one of the hardest of my life. Knowing what I knew but pretending like everything was normal, it was like carrying a weight I couldn't shake off. I watched Sheila carefully that morning, noting every move she made. She acted like nothing had changed, but now I could see through the cracks in her performance. Sheila kissed me on the cheek as she left for work, her smile bright but her eyes distracted. She even wore the diamond earrings, the ones I now knew weren't for me. That small, shiny detail was like a slap in the face. As soon as she was gone, I got to work. I wasn't going to let her control the narrative. I started by going through her laptop. Sheila had always been tech-savvy, but I knew her habits well enough to find her weak spots. She used the same password for most things, her high school mascot and the year she graduated. It took me less than 5 minutes to get into her email. I was prepared to see more messages from work, but what I found was even worse. Sheila had an entire folder of photos and videos labeled private. My heart pounded as I opened it, hoping I was wrong, hoping I wouldn't find what I was afraid of. But there it was. Photos of her in that same red dress the text had mentioned, sitting at a fancy restaurant with a man I didn't recognize. They were laughing, leaning in close, their hands brushing across the table. And then the videos. One of her in a hotel room, holding up a glass of champagne and giggling as she panned the camera to show the bed behind her. "Wish you were here," she whispered, her voice sultry. I slammed the laptop shut, unable to watch any more. My hands were shaking, my throat dry. I felt sick, but I couldn't stop now. I needed to know who this man was. Her phone was still my best bet. I knew from the messages that she'd saved his contact as work, but I didn't know his real name. I decided to call my friend David, who worked in IT and owed me a favor. I explained the situation without going into too much detail, just enough for him to help me. "Send me the number," he said. "I'll run it through my system and see what I can find." An hour later, he called me back. "His name is Marcus Reynolds," David said. "Works as a regional manager at some marketing firm. Lives about an hour away from you. Want me to dig deeper?" "No," I said quickly, my stomach churning. "Thanks, man. This is enough." I hung up and sat there, staring at the name I'd scribbled on a piece of paper. Marcus Reynolds. He wasn't some faceless mystery anymore. He was real. And now, I had a name to go with the betrayal. That night, I decided to test Sheila. I wanted to see how far she'd go to cover her tracks. When she came home, I greeted her with a smile and a glass of wine, playing the role of the oblivious husband. She seemed relieved, like she'd been expecting a fight. "Rough day?" I asked, handing her the glass. "Exhausting," she sighed, sinking into the couch. "Work's been so stressful lately." "Oh, really?" I said, keeping my tone light. "Anything exciting happening?" She hesitated for a fraction of a second before shaking her head. "No, just the usual." I nodded, pretending to buy it. "By the way," I said casually, "I was thinking about planning a little getaway for us. Maybe a weekend at the beach. What do you think?" Her eyes widened slightly, and she forced a smile. "That sounds nice," she said. "But things are really busy at work right now. I don't know if I can take time off." There it was. Another lie. I leaned back, taking a sip of my own wine, and let the silence linger. "That's a shame," I said finally. "I was really looking forward to spending some time together. We haven't had much of that lately, have we?" She fidgeted, her smile faltering. "We'll make it happen soon," she said, avoiding my eyes. I knew she was lying, but I didn't push her. Not yet. Instead, I changed the subject, letting her think she dodged the bullet. But in reality, I was already planning my next move. The days that followed were a strange mix of calm and chaos. On the surface, everything seemed normal. Sheila went about her routine, and I pretended to be the clueless husband. But beneath it all, a storm was brewing. I couldn't stop thinking about Marcus Reynolds, the man who had invaded my life without ever stepping foot in my home. I spent hours researching him online, piecing together a profile. Marcus was a textbook charmer, well-dressed, successful, and single. His social media accounts were filled with pictures of fancy dinners, business trips, and women draped over his arm. But what stood out to me the most was a photo of him at the same restaurant where Sheila had taken that selfie in the red dress. It was all connected, and the more I uncovered, the angrier I became. But I couldn't let my emotions take over. I needed to stay focused, to play this game carefully. The next step was to gather more evidence. I knew Sheila was lying to me, but I wanted to make sure there was no way she could deny it. So, I decided to track her movements. Sheila had always been predictable. Every Thursday, she went to a yoga class at a studio downtown. Or at least, that's what she claimed. I had never thought much about it until now. That Thursday, I left work early and parked my car down the street from the studio. I waited for nearly an hour, watching as women came and went, but Sheila never showed up. My heart pounded as I started my car and drove to the address I had found for Marcus Reynolds. It was a sleek apartment building in a posh part of town. I parked across the street and waited, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. And then, just as the sun was starting to set, I saw her. Sheila stepped out of a car I didn't recognize, wearing a fitted dress and heels. She looked like she was ready for a date, not a yoga class. My chest tightened as I watched her walk up to the building, her hips swaying, her phone clutched in one hand. She disappeared inside, and I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. I had been right all along, but seeing it with my own eyes made it all the more painful. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I drove aimlessly, trying to process what I had just seen. By the time I returned, it was past midnight, and Sheila was already in bed. She didn't stir as I climbed under the covers, but I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. The next morning, I decided to confront her, not about Marcus, but about her lies. "You were out late last night," I said casually over breakfast. She hesitated, her spoon hovering over her bowl of yogurt. "Yoga ran late," she said quickly. "We had a new instructor, and she wanted to go over some advanced techniques." I raised an eyebrow, my stomach churning at how easily the lie rolled off her tongue. "Advanced techniques, huh?" She nodded, avoiding my eyes. "Yeah, it was exhausting. I'm still sore." I couldn't help but laugh, a bitter sound that made her look up sharply. "What's so funny?" she asked, her voice defensive. "Nothing," I said, shaking my head. "Just ironic, I guess." "Ironic?" "Yeah. You being sore from yoga, considering you never even made it to the studio." Her face froze, the color draining from her cheeks. "What are you talking about?" I leaned back in my chair, folding my arms. "I was downtown yesterday, near your yoga studio. Thought I'd surprise you. Maybe pick you up after class. Funny thing is, you weren't there." She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. For the first time in months, Sheila looked genuinely rattled. I must have forgotten to tell you," she stammered. "The class got canceled last minute. I went to grab dinner instead." "Dinner?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "With who?" "Just a coworker," she said quickly. "You don't know her." "Her?" I pressed, my voice low and cold. "Yes, her," Sheila snapped, her tone sharp now. "Why are you interrogating me? Can't I have a life outside of this house?" I didn't answer. I just stared at her, letting the silence speak for itself. After a few tense moments, she stood up, grabbing her phone off the counter. "I'm late for work," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "We'll talk about this later." She stormed out of the house, leaving me alone in the kitchen. My hands were shaking, but I felt a strange sense of satisfaction. I had caught her in a lie, and now she knew I was watching. But this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Sheila's behavior changed after our tense breakfast. She was quieter, more guarded, as if she knew the walls were closing in. But I wasn't going to back down. I had started to uncover the truth, and I was determined to see it through, no matter how much it hurt. The following weekend, Sheila told me she had a work event to attend. "It's mandatory," she said, barely meeting my eyes. "One of those networking things. I won't be home until late." I played along, nodding as if I believed her. "That sounds important. Don't let me keep you." She gave me a tight smile, grabbed her purse, and left without another word. As soon as the door closed, I grabbed my keys and followed her. I kept a safe distance as she drove across town, my heart pounding in my chest. She wasn't heading to a work event. I knew that much. And sure enough, her car eventually pulled into the parking lot of a hotel. I parked a few spaces away and watched as she got out of the car, adjusting her dress and checking her reflection in the window. She looked nervous, glancing around before heading inside. I waited for a few minutes before following her. My hands were shaking as I walked into the lobby, trying to act casual. I spotted her at the front desk, talking to the receptionist. She was handed a key card, and then she disappeared into the elevator. I approached the desk, my pulse racing. "Excuse me," I said to the receptionist. "I think I left my phone in my wife's room. Could you remind me what number she's in?" The receptionist hesitated, eyeing me suspiciously. "I'm sorry, sir, but I can't give out that information." I forced a smile, trying to keep my voice steady. "Sheila Reynolds," I said, using Marcus's last name on a hunch. "She just checked in. I really need to grab my phone before she leaves." The receptionist's face softened, and she nodded. "Room 512, she said quietly. My stomach dropped. I mumbled a thank you and headed for the elevator, my mind racing. When I reached the 5th floor, I found myself standing outside room 512, my hand hovering over the door. I could hear muffled voices inside, hers and a man's. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. I didn't knock. Instead, I pulled out my phone and started recording. I didn't know what I would do with the footage, but I needed proof. Slowly, I pressed my ear to the door, trying to make out their conversation. Can't keep doing this, Sheila's voice said, her tone panicked. You don't have to, the man replied. It had to be Marcus. Leave him. You know you want to. It's not that simple, she said, her voice cracking. He's starting to figure things out. I clenched my fists, fighting back the urge to burst through the door. Instead, I kept recording, capturing every word. He won't do anything, Marcus said confidently. He's too soft. He'll cry, maybe beg, but that's it. He's not a threat. Those words hit me like a punch to the gut. Was that how Sheila saw me? Weak? Pathetic? I don't know, Sheila said. He's been acting different lately. He took down the wedding photo, and he's asking questions. Marcus laughed, a low, smug sound that made my blood boil. Let him ask. By the time he puts the pieces together, we'll be long gone. I couldn't listen anymore. I stepped back, my hands trembling as I stopped the recording and tucked my phone into my pocket. My mind was racing, torn between confronting them and walking away. But then I remembered something, the hotel room number. I turned and walked briskly back to the lobby, heading straight for the front desk. Hi, I said to the receptionist, forcing a smile. There's been a mix-up with room 512. Can you call security for me? The receptionist frowned, clearly confused. Is there an issue, sir? Yes, I said firmly. I think my wife might be in danger. Please, just call security. Reluctantly, she picked up the phone and made the call. Minutes later, 2 security guards arrived. I explained the situation in vague terms, keeping my voice calm and steady. When we reached the room, I stepped aside, letting the guards knock on the door. There was a moment of silence, followed by Sheila's voice. Who is it? She called out, her tone nervous. Hotel security, one of the guards said. Please open the door. The sound of scrambling came from inside, voices, footsteps, a chair scraping across the floor. Finally, the door opened, and there stood Sheila, her face pale and her hair disheveled. Is everything okay, ma'am? The guard asked. Sheila nodded quickly, forcing a smile. Yes, everything's fine. There must be some kind of mistake. Marcus appeared behind her, his expression calm but his eyes wary. What's going on here? He asked, his voice smooth and confident. I stepped forward, meeting Sheila's wide-eyed stare. That's what I'd like to know, I said coldly. Her face turned white, and for the first time, she had no words. Sheila's silence spoke louder than any excuse she could have come up with. Her face was drained of color, her mouth slightly open as if she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Marcus, on the other hand, didn't flinch. He stood there, arms crossed, his confident smirk making my blood boil. Who is this? Marcus asked, his tone dripping with condescension as he glanced between me and Sheila. A friend of yours? I ignored him, keeping my focus on Sheila. Well, Sheila, do you want to explain what's going on? Or should I start? Her lips trembled as she tried to piece together a response. I can explain, Nick. It's not what it looks like. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. Not what it looks like. You're in a hotel room with another man, lying to my face about yoga classes and work events, and it's not what it looks like? Do you even hear yourself? Marcus stepped forward, clearly enjoying the moment. Look, man, he said, his tone infuriatingly casual. I think you're overreacting. Sheila and I, shut up, I snapped, my voice sharp enough to cut him off mid-sentence. I didn't ask you to speak. He raised his hands in mock surrender, but the smug grin never left his face. All right, no need to get hostile. I turned back to Sheila, my chest tight with anger and betrayal. How long, Sheila? How long has this been going on? She hesitated, her eyes darting to Marcus as if searching for guidance. That hesitation was all the confirmation I needed. 6 months? I guessed, my voice rising. A year? How long have you been sneaking around behind my back? She finally found her voice, though it came out barely above a whisper. It's not what you think, Nick. I didn't mean for this to happen. Oh, you didn't mean for it to happen? I repeated, my tone mocking. You didn't mean to have an affair? You didn't mean to lie to my face every day? Tell me, Sheila, what part of this wasn't intentional? Tears welled up in her eyes, but I felt no sympathy. Not this time. I had given her everything, my trust, my love, my loyalty, and she had thrown it all away. Marcus decided to chime in again. Look, Nick, maybe you two should talk this out in private. Clearly, this is a personal matter. I stepped closer to him, my fists clenched at my sides. Don't you dare say my name like we're friends. You don't get to act like you're above this. You're just as guilty as she is. The tension in the room was suffocating. Sheila finally broke down, her tears spilling over as she buried her face in her hands. I'm sorry, she sobbed. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want to hurt you. Hurt me? I repeated, laughing bitterly. You didn't want to hurt me? Sheila, do you have any idea what you've done? You've destroyed our marriage. You've destroyed everything. One of the security guards, who had been quietly observing the scene, cleared his throat. Sir, we understand this is a private matter, but we can't have this kind of confrontation in the hotel. If there's nothing illegal happening, we'll have to ask you all to leave. I nodded stiffly, my jaw clenched. Fine, I'm leaving, but this isn't over. I turned on my heel and stormed out of the room, my mind racing. I couldn't bear to look at Sheila or Marcus for another second. The hallway felt too narrow, too confining, as I made my way to the elevator. My chest was tight, my breathing shallow, but I forced myself to keep moving. When I reached the parking lot, I sat in my car for what felt like hours, my hands gripping the steering wheel as I tried to process everything. The betrayal was unbearable, but the humiliation was worse. Sheila had reduced me to nothing more than a fool in front of that man. A man who clearly thought he was better than me. I needed to take back control. I needed to figure out my next move, but I couldn't do it in the heat of the moment. I drove home in silence, my mind buzzing with a mix of anger and heartbreak. When Sheila came home later that night, I was sitting in the living room, waiting for her. She walked in cautiously, her eyes red from crying. She looked at me like a child waiting to be scolded, but I didn't say a word. I just stared at her, letting the silence fill the room. Nick, she began, her voice trembling. Please, just let me explain. Explain? I said, my voice cold and steady. Explain what, Sheila? That you've been cheating on me? That you've been lying to me? Go ahead. I'm listening. She hesitated, then sat down across from me, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I never meant for it to go this far, she said. It started out as a mistake. But Marcus, he made me feel alive again. I don't know how else to say it. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. Alive? Is that what this was about? You felt bored, so you decided to destroy our marriage? No, she said quickly. It wasn't like that. I love you, Nick. I do. But stop, I said, cutting her off. Don't you dare say you love me. You don't get to say that after everything you've done. She broke down again, sobbing into her hands, but I didn't feel an ounce of pity. For once, I wasn't the one crying. For once, I wasn't the one begging. And it felt good, empowering, even. I'm filing for divorce, I said finally, my voice calm and resolute. You can stay here tonight, but tomorrow, I want you out of this house. She looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. Nick, please, she whispered. We can work through this. I'll end it with Marcus. I'll do whatever it takes. But her words meant nothing to me anymore. The damage was done, and there was no going back. The silence in the house the next morning was deafening. Sheila didn't try to talk to me as I got ready for work. She lingered in the kitchen, staring blankly at her coffee mug, as if trying to summon the courage to say something. I didn't give her the chance. I grabbed my keys, walked out the door, and didn't look back. At work, I couldn't focus. Every email, Every phone call felt like a distraction from the chaos in my personal life. I kept replaying the confrontation in the hotel, the look on Sheila's face, Marcus's smug grin. It was like a loop I couldn't escape. By lunchtime, I knew I couldn't keep this to myself anymore. I called David, my friend who had helped me track down Marcus's number. He was the only person I trusted enough to share the whole story with. "Nick, man, I don't even know what to say," he said after I finished recounting everything. "I'm so sorry. What are you going to do?" "I told her I'm filing for divorce," I said, my voice hollow. "I can't stay married to her after this." "You're doing the right thing," he said firmly. "But if you need anything, legal help, a place to crash, whatever, just say the word." "Thanks," I muttered. "I appreciate it." The conversation gave me a brief sense of relief, like I wasn't completely alone in this mess. But as the day went on, the weight of what lay ahead began to sink in. Divorce wasn't just about ending a relationship. It was about dismantling a life we had built together. The house, the finances, the memories. Everything would have to be divided, and I wasn't ready to face that reality yet. When I got home that evening, Sheila was waiting for me in the living room. She looked exhausted, her eyes puffy and red from crying. I ignored her and headed straight for the stairs. "Nick, wait," she said, her voice pleading. "Can we talk?" I stopped but didn't turn around. "There's nothing left to talk about." "Please," she said, her voice breaking. "I need you to understand." I turned slowly, my arms crossed. "Understand what, Sheila? That you threw away our marriage for some guy who made you feel alive? That you lied to me for months? What exactly am I supposed to understand?" She flinched at my words but didn't back down. "I know I hurt you," she said, "and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. But it wasn't just about Marcus. It was about us. About how distant we've been. How empty everything felt." "Empty?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You think I wasn't feeling that too? You think I didn't notice how things had changed? But instead of talking to me, instead of trying to fix it, you decided to cheat on me. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is for me?" Tears streamed down her face, but I didn't care. I had spent too long bottling up my own pain to feel anything for hers. "I don't deserve your forgiveness," she said quietly, "but I'm asking for it anyway. Please, Nick, don't let this be the end of us." I stared at her, my chest tight with a mix of anger and sorrow. "It already is," I said finally. "You ended us the moment you walked into that hotel room." Her sobs grew louder as I turned and walked up the stairs, leaving her alone in the living room. I locked myself in the bedroom, sinking onto the bed as the weight of everything pressed down on me. I had made my decision, but that didn't make it any easier. The next day, I called a divorce lawyer. I explained the situation in as much detail as I could, trying to keep my emotions in check. The lawyer was sympathetic, but direct. "Do you have proof of the affair?" she asked. "Yes," I said, my voice firm. "I recorded a conversation between her and her affair partner, and I've got screenshots of messages." "That's good," she said. "It'll strengthen your case, especially if you're concerned about the division of assets. We'll need to gather everything you have." After the call, I felt a small sense of control returning. For the first time in weeks, I had a plan. I spent the rest of the day organizing everything. Copies of our financial records, photos of the messages, and even the video from outside the hotel room. It was painful to go through it all, but I knew it was necessary. That evening, Sheila tried to approach me again, but I shut her down before she could say anything. "I've hired a lawyer," I said bluntly. "You'll hear from them soon." Her face crumpled, but she didn't argue. She just nodded and went upstairs, leaving me alone in the kitchen. For the first time, I felt like I had the upper hand, but it was a hollow victory. No matter how this ended, there would be no winners. As I sat there, staring at the empty space on the wall where our wedding photo used to hang, I realized how much my life had changed in just a few short weeks. The betrayal, the lies, the confrontation. It all felt like a bad dream I couldn't wake up from. But this was my reality now, and I was determined to face it head-on. The next few days felt like walking through a battlefield, where every room in the house carried memories of what used to be. The silence between Sheila and me was deafening. She stayed mostly in the guest room now, as if trying to give me space, though I knew it was more about avoiding the cold, hard truth she had to face every time she saw me. I focused on the divorce proceedings, pouring all my energy into preparing for the inevitable confrontation in court. My lawyer had reassured me that with the evidence I had, text messages, the recording, and the financial documents, I was in a strong position. Still, there was a heaviness that wouldn't leave. This wasn't just about winning. It was about reclaiming my dignity and rebuilding my life. One evening, as I sat at the dining table going through more paperwork, Sheila approached me hesitantly. She looked fragile, her once confident demeanor now replaced with something I could only describe as defeat. "Nick," she said softly, "can we talk? Just one last time." I sighed, leaning back in my chair. "What is there left to say, Sheila? You made your choices, and now we're here." "I know," she said, her voice trembling, "but I need you to understand that I never stopped loving you. I made a mistake, a horrible, unforgivable mistake, but it wasn't because I didn't care about you. I was lost, Nick. I didn't know how to fix us." Her words were like salt on an open wound. "Fix us?" I echoed bitterly. "You didn't try to fix anything, Sheila. You didn't come to me. You didn't talk to me. You ran to someone else, and you destroyed everything we built." Tears welled up in her eyes, but I pressed on. "You think love is enough to excuse what you did? Love is supposed to come with respect, with loyalty. You threw that away the moment you walked into that hotel room." Sheila collapsed into a chair across from me, her head in her hands. "I've lost you, haven't I?" she whispered. I didn't answer right away. Part of me wanted to comfort her, to tell her things would be okay, but I couldn't. That part of me was gone. "Yes," I said finally, my voice steady. "You lost me, and you lost the life we had together." She nodded, her shoulders shaking as she cried. I didn't feel the satisfaction I thought I would. If anything, I just felt empty. The next day, I came home to find a note on the kitchen counter. It was from Sheila. "Nick, I've moved out. I'm staying with a friend while I figure things out. I know I can't undo the damage I've done, but I hope one day you can forgive me, not for me, but for yourself. I'll cooperate with the divorce and make this as easy as possible for you. You deserve that much, at least." Sheila read the note twice, trying to process the finality of it. The house felt different without her presence. Quieter, yes, but also lighter. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. I spent the evening cleaning the house, trying to reclaim it as my own. I took down the last of our shared photos, boxing them up along with anything else that reminded me of her. It was painful, but it also felt like a step forward. A few weeks later, the divorce was finalized. Sheila kept her promise to cooperate, and we were able to settle things quickly. I kept the house, the car, and most of our shared savings. She didn't fight me on any of it, which made me wonder if she was carrying her own guilt. Life after the divorce was strange at first. I had to relearn how to live alone, how to navigate the world without the person I had spent years building a life with. But with time, the pain began to fade. One evening, months later, I found myself sitting in the same spot at the dining table where Sheila and I had our last conversation. The house was quiet, but it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt peaceful. I picked up my phone and opened my notes app, where I had written down a thought that had been lingering in my mind since the day I found out about the affair. This isn't the end. It's a new beginning. And for the first time in a long time, I believed it.